In the event of an expansion of fighting, evacuation of residents from the Gaza Strip will be considered. Now, this was something that was reported today, yesterday, and the day before. I spoke about the developments in Israel and the warning that's coming from the IDF Chief of Staff about a horror scenario in case Israel expands the war in Gaza, in case Israel expands the genocide and has more troops inside of the Gaza Strip, as the political leadership wants in Israel, or some of the political leadership in Israel wants, and where that could go. Now, he described a horror scenario in the numbers of casualties, a horror scenario in how many Israelis would be killed, and in the fact that Hamas would be staying there fighting Israel for a very long time. Similarly, now Israel is, of course, having so many attacks being conducted by the Palestinian resistance, and Israel is suffering heavily inside of the Gaza Strip. This is coming after this statement that came from the IDF Chief of Staff. In Israel, they're portraying this as an in-case scenario. All of this is hypothetical because there are many questions about Israel's capability to conduct a larger scale ground invasion into the Gaza Strip with all of the losses that they're suffering now. But they're saying that if we do, then we need to evacuate some of the areas surrounding Gaza. What does that mean? That means that Israel is confirming that the Palestinian resistance has capabilities to conduct actions against Israeli forces and Israeli locations behind enemy lines inside of Israeli territories. This is something very important. Now, the Palestinian resistance, it had several attacks that were considered behind enemy lines in the buffer zone, what's described as the buffer zone, but Israel saying this now and linking this to Israeli territories. Well, this means that Israel knows very well that the Palestinian resistance is able to invade Israel again. What does that mean in the grand scheme of things? It means that 18 months since October the 7th, 2023, and after so much destruction and genocide and barbarism coming from Israel, Israel is confirming now that Hamas is able to conduct, and the Palestinian resistance, actions inside of the state of Israel. This is what it means, and that's very significant coming from Israel. This is not just a random report. If Israel is preparing to evacuate areas, that means they are preparing for Hamas fighters or other resistance movements fighters to be invading Israel. This is a very important report coming from Israel. Now, moving on to the reports that speak about the de-escalation, the potential of reaching a ceasefire, and the developments on that side. There was a report in Al Arabiya. Al Arabiya is a Saudi network. Now, they're saying something that we're not hearing in many other places. What are they saying? They're saying that the Gaza ceasefire talks in Cairo are witnessing a significant breakthrough. And they are quoting two security officials. According to them, these security officials and security sources are telling them that all of the talks that are happening now between the Hamas delegation and the Israeli delegation, both in Qatar and in Egypt, are having a great breakthrough. They are saying that there are more understandings coming from both sides, that they need a long-term solution. Now, officially, Israel is denying that there's any progress, and Hamas isn't really stating that there has been a breakthrough. Both sides haven't declared anything. But this could be a blackout phase. A blackout phase, meaning the phase where both sides don't talk much before an agreement has been reached, or before they actually declare reaching an agreement. Is there some sort of backing to this by some of the statements that we heard in the past few days? Of course there are. How? Well, yesterday we spoke about Ron Dermer saying that the war is going to end within 12 months. I spoke about Israeli security officials usually tied to the government, saying that Benjamin Netanyahu made a decision, and that decision is he's going to reach October by the max, as in we're looking to get a ceasefire agreement potentially beforehand. And more reports coming that we could see something beginning as early as May. And the reason that both sides aren't declaring much is that so the actual prospect of a ceasefire agreement being reached is bigger. There's more chances of it being successful. And usually if you have more statements, there are more criticisms that would come, and it would attract more scrutiny, and it could potentially hinder an agreement. There are also talks, and have been talks in the past few weeks from Hamas, that they are prepared for a long-term ceasefire. On the ground, of course, things are still going ahead with the genocide inside of the Gaza Strip, and more people are being brutally killed, brutally mass murdered inside of the Gaza Strip. However, these are developments that are happening on the ground. There are certain moves that are happening and have happened in the past few weeks, actually, that show us that something is happening in relation to the prisoners as well. For example, the Israeli occupation, released 10 prisoners, including the paramedic who survived the Tal Sultan massacre. Why would Israel, this is a very important question, why would Israel be releasing Palestinians for free? It doesn't make any sense. Israel doesn't do that out of goodwill. Israel doesn't do this for free without any... There has to be something that is pushing Israel to release Palestinians, Palestinian prisoners, or Palestinian hostages, as in the real hostages, people who are kidnapped, paramedics and healthcare staff, and innocent civilians from the Gaza Strip. This is not the first time. It happened several times in the past few weeks in multiple knocks. So in some cases, like 7 were released. In other cases, women were released. And now we're having this confirmation and report that 10 Palestinian prisoners were released. This is usually, and again, that is not a confirmation, that is an observation from myself. This is usually an indication that things are happening behind closed doors, and certain actions are required by each party or one of the parties to show that they are willing to reach an agreement. This is the interpretation, this is my understanding, because Israel doesn't really release any Palestinian prisoners for no reason. And why would they, if we're talking about a genocide happening in Gaza, with the Palestinian resistance using the Israeli prisoners of war also as leverage? Israel would want to keep as many cards in their hands as possible, rather than release them and leave them to the negotiations, have more leverage against Hamas with these people. And they do that. They did that, and they still do that. And the fact that they are being released now, or some of them are being released, shows that things are happening. But there's one bigger thing, one thing that is much bigger that's happening, that is leading us to believe that things are heading towards a de-escalation. And that was also reported in Israel, and this is in relation to the confirmation about the significant developments and progress that the US-Iranian negotiations are having. So, this was published in Israel today. Ministers in Israel, senior ministers in Israel, have been updated and briefed that there's a high chance that the United States and Iran will reach an agreement. According to this report, this is a change of trend, as until recently the assessment in Israel was the chances of an agreement were slim. The political and security cabinet is expected to convene this Sunday. This is a very strong development. And they said in this report that the defense establishment has informed senior ministers that the chances of signing a new nuclear agreement between Iran and the United States are higher than the chances that such an agreement will not be signed. Now, they're quoting statements coming from Trump and statements coming from the Iranian foreign minister. Donald Trump saying we are in pretty good shape and I think this deal will be made. it's going to happen. It's pretty sure it's going to happen. We'll have something without having to start to drop bombs. The Iranian foreign minister saying sometimes determination alone is not enough, and the disagreements may be so serious that reaching a result will not be possible. Some of the gaps are serious, but we hope that we can move forward quickly. This is showing keenness coming from the Iranian side to reach an agreement, and a very clear statement coming from the United States president that he actually wants a progress with Iran. He wants to deal with Iran, and he clearly isn't interested in having a direct war with Iran. Why is that so relevant to what's happening in Gaza? Well, because Iran, according to Israel and in the Israeli narrative, is the main root of evil behind all of this. Benjamin Netanyahu and many Israeli leaders were saying during the past 1.5 years, and way before, the past several decades now, that Iran is the root of all evil in the region, and at one point, Iran needs to be attacked. Benjamin Netanyahu lobbied the United States to go to wars, especially the war in Iraq, and Benjamin Netanyahu also lobbied the United States and still tries to lobby the United States to go to a war against Iran. Clearly, that hasn't really worked with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is more interested in reaching an agreement rather than having war, because he knows the vulnerabilities. Yes, the United States is attacking Yemen, is conducting massacres in Yemen, very ineffective. As a matter of fact, they lost an F-18 Super Hornet yesterday that they claimed fell off the USS Harry S. Truman. And the Ansarullah are showing that they are capable of continuing despite the United States attacks. But Yemen is not Iran. Yemen is far less capable than Iran. And Yemen provides a much smaller threat to the United States than Iran. Iran has much larger capabilities, more destructive firepower, very good air defense systems in place, and they have been preparing for an all-out war for a very long time. Now, if the United States would want to reach a deal with Iran, then the smaller parties would have to reach an agreement too. Why? Because, well, Iran is probably the most influential, or one of the most influential countries in the West Asian region and in the Gulf area. The United States knows the vulnerabilities. They have to reach an agreement with them, but by reaching an agreement with them, they would need to have other solutions that started following the Israeli genocide inside of the Gaza Strip. And I spoke a lot about Iran giving the peace process, or the negotiations, the ceasefire negotiation process, time without responding to Israel, as a show of willingness and keenness to try and de-escalate and reach a solution, rather than go out on an all-out war, because Iran knows if they keep having back and forth attacks with Israel, it will eventually escalate and can potentially very, very quickly get out of hand. That's why during their attacks in what they call True Promise 1 and True Promise 2, when they declared their attacks, they said, or responses to be more accurate, they said that we carried these attacks, they were in line with international law based on this UN charter, this clause, and from our perspective, the deal is done. Israel attacked us, we responded, that is it. They weren't showing intent to continue to attract more attacks and then keep having back and forth attacks with Israel. That's despite all of the statements coming from Iran against Israel as a state historically, and also against the United States. So if Iran and the United States are going to reach an agreement, if Donald Trump is viewing this positively, if Donald Trump is more interested in reaching agreement than not, then that means Israel would have to reach an agreement too. The United States will not accept Israel going ahead with this barbaric genocide forever. Yes, the United States has been a participant. Without the United States, Israel wouldn't have been here. And yes, of course, none of this would have happened if it wasn't for the unbelievable heroism of the Palestinian people in Gaza. That's something very important to note, alongside other developments too. The fact that Egypt prevented an ethnic cleansing directly, and the other developments that happened, of course, the participation from Ansarullah, the fact that we had other fronts too, all of these things are connected together, of course. But if the United States would reach an agreement with Iran, they would want a de-escalation in the whole region. Now, Donald Trump is showing that. Donald Trump is changing his tone towards Gaza. It doesn't matter if you believe him or not, he's changing his tone. We know how many 180s he's done before. And of course, all of these are indications that things are about to de-escalate. And again, you won't necessarily see everything being done on the ground immediately. Usually that happens before any ceasefire takes place. And this is what we saw before the ceasefire, phase one of the ceasefire took place this time. There were attacks up until the last day, both from Israel against the innocent civilians and from the Palestinian resistance against the Israeli terror forces inside of the Gaza Strip, and they carried out some of the most intense attacks against them, verified with released footage. These are the developments in relation to the ceasefire, the de-escalation, and some of the developments on the ground that make us believe or think at least that there is a de-escalation coming ahead. Moving on to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. The JNS, the senator, the Republican senator from the United States, Coleman, I think his name was, the one who said we're the masters of the universe. He was criticizing social media, and he was saying that we need to work harder to have influence in social media. What he didn't say is how much they, of course, censor and put money into mainstream media to oppress, to suppress, and to shut down any criticism against Israel. Not just any criticism coming from Israel, any revelations of the truth that is happening inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, some of these were published in 60 Minutes. In the United States, there was a program with the children of Gaza who were maimed, who were severely wounded, critically wounded, very touching stories. And that's, of course, the tip of the iceberg from the grand picture inside of Gaza. But now we have a resignation. Multiple reports came online. Paramount under fire for meddling in Gaza coverage after 60 Minutes producer resigns. The 60 Minutes producer resigned because, according to him, well, they were trying to control too much. He's saying journalistic independence made me leave my job. Why is he saying that? He's saying that because he had more pressure being applied on him to hide the actual facts that are happening on the ground. On the ground, it's very simple. They had a show. They brought Palestinian children, severely, critically wounded they were. Some of them were very fortunate to survive the horrendous attacks that Israel conducted against them and against so many others inside of the Gaza Strip. But this is another sign that, well, the propaganda machine, the pressure machine, the lobby, it doesn't stop. And again, instead of looking in the mirror and thinking, why are we receiving such high levels of criticism and, stopping the genocide, maybe, no, they look to shut down any criticism and anyone trying to reveal even the suffering of the people. Like even revealing the suffering of the people inside of Gaza, to them is a crime. And to them is something that attracts hatred for them. Instead of having a look in the mirror, questioning, reviewing, seeing all of their history and how they treated the Palestinian people, coming, stealing their land and enslaving them and killing them and expelling them. No, to them, of course, with the entitled approach and with the supremacist approach, we need to control them and they need to be quiet. And likewise, anyone from the West who dares to come up on any kind of program linked to mainstream media and have something. But clearly, and thankfully, there are people with a level of independence, with a level of integrity, and there are lines that they are not willing to cross, especially in relation to revelations coming on the ground about people suffering.